So we'll get started, and here we go. So my name is Jay McDaniel, and I'm really glad you're here. And this event is sponsored by an organization called Process and Faith. And if you're a member of Process and Faith, great. And if you're not, it's free. So please do go to its website. And I've put that in a chat so you can figure out how to get there and join us. And also, Process and Faith has the capacity to do forums, further conversations. And so Ken and I both realize, Ken Pearson, that there will be many subjects that we would like to dig into deeper, that you would like to dig into much deeper, that we won't get to. And so the good news is the conversation does not need to end here. We can talk further on the forum, and I've given the link to that also in chat, so you'll get that in chat. And if by chance you find yourself curious about process philosophy and theology, wondering, well, what in the world is it? I've given a link to that too. The Cobb Institute has a page on its website called Educators Resources. And you'll see books and PowerPoints and slideshows free for the taking. And that link is also in your chat. One last word, and I'm going to turn it over to Ken Pearson. We're voluntary organizations. Process and Faith is primarily volunteer. The Cobb Institute, not exclusively volunteer, but largely volunteer. And another organization called the Center for Process Studies. And those three organizations are really behind this event. And if you find that you'd like to give a donation, we will happily welcome it. But not necessary, we're just glad you're here. So with that, I think I'm the process guy and Ken is the Enneagram guy. And let's let Ken Pearson take over. Ken, you're on.
Thank you, Jay. I will say that I want to echo the invitation that Jay issued for involvement with those organizations. And in particular, I'm going to, as a member of the board of the Cobb Institute, I really want to invite you to be involved with that organization. And I hope that you'll find something there worthwhile, because not only am I on the board, I'm the treasurer of the board and the Institute. And so I hope we're doing something that you would find valuable and would want to support, and we would love to have that. Let me jump in because, again, we've only allocated an hour. And one of the things that I would say about the Enneagram is there is no elevator speech to describe the Enneagram. But I'm going to try to accomplish that a little bit. Now, I want to think it's only fair that I give you a little bit of background about who I am. I am a second vocation, currently United Methodist pastor. I spent about 35 years in the business world. I'm trained as a CPA. That was my business background. But about 10 years ago, I was introduced to the Enneagram, and I have been studying it and working with it ever since. And then about 5 years ago, I actually began teaching the Enneagram. And I think it's also important, if I were to tell you I'm a second career pastor, I'm in the United Methodist Church, which tells you I'm bringing a Christian point of view. But the Christian point of view is not the only view for the Enneagram. It's just the view I bring. One of the things I also think is important is to help you understand a little bit is what I would call my Enneagram lineage. Some of these names you might recognize, but the way I came to the Enneagram, if I go backwards and to where it began with a gentleman by the name of Oscar Ichazo, and then Claudio Naranjo learned the Enneagram from Ichazo. And Naranjo taught the Enneagram to a group of Jesuit priests. And the group of Jesuit priests began to use it in spiritual direction. And one of the people that picked that up is a name that maybe some of you are familiar with, Father Richard Rohr. And from there, my primary mentor, Suzanne Stabile. Richard Rohr was her spiritual director for years, and she taught, Richard taught Suzanne the Enneagram. So what I want to try to do is hit a few of things that I've learned and that I teach at a high level, something that just enough for us to give something to Jay to tie it into process theology, because I am not a process theology expert. Only came upon it about 18 months ago. But one of the things I will say is just today, back to my lineage, I was listening to one of Father Rohr's podcasts. It's a fairly recent one, but it's one I had not listened to. And in that particular podcast, they talk specifically, briefly, about process theology, and in particular about Alfred North Whitehead. Rohr encountered that when he was going through seminary, and he was taking, I think, what he called a modern philosophy class. And one of the comments he made about that is, we dismissed Whitehead and process theology way too quickly. And it was because Whitehead did not profess Christianity quick enough for us. So I think that's part of the way of saying that Rohr probably wouldn't identify himself as a process theologian, but he talks a lot about becoming and evolving, and that it is a process. One of the things I think that has happened, the Enneagram goes way back, all the way back to at least to what we might call the desert mothers and fathers, and it has come through the modern world through all three of the Abrahamic religious traditions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. But current resurgence of interest in the Enneagram probably began back in the early 1900s as it began to be talked about and published in papers and books. Up until that point, it had been strictly used as a one-on-one spiritual direction tool. But one of the other things that kind of followed that closely was some work that different people have done, and they began to realize that there was this real convergence, this overlay, different phraseology and verbiage, but a real tie-in to modern psychology. And in particular, three psychologists whose work tie in real tightly with the Enneagram were Carl Jung, Maurice Nicole, and Karen Horney. And we don't have a whole lot of time, as we've already said, to go deep into this, but in particular, some of the work of those three where they talk about our shadow sides or phraseologies like that, and also where they identify and talk about humans having three centers of intelligence. I'll return to that in a moment. I will say that, my history should say that, at least for me, additionally, that I'm here tonight, that I think the Enneagram is a very powerful spiritual development tool. And for me, it is the most powerful spiritual development tool I've found. But it is only a tool. It won't do everything for you. But one of the things it's great at is helping you identify other spiritual tools or disciplines that would uniquely guide and enhance your spiritual growth path. Now, also like a tool, like any tool, the Enneagram can be misused. And one of the, at least in my experience, my teaching, my lineage, one of the biggest areas where the Enneagram is misused is by one of us thinking that we can identify the Enneagram type of another person, and then using that to either criticize, undermine, or in some ways attack that other person. My teaching and my lineage says that self-identification is the only reliable means of determining one's Enneagram number. With that said, that puts into doubt a lot of what you would find out there on the internet about some of these tests, Enneagram tests. my experience and my mentor's experience, Suzanne, is that Stabile, is that those Enneagram tests lead to misidentification the majority of the time. Now, having said that, interest is worthwhile as long as you're continuing to travel the path. One of the things I want to talk about is that the structure of the Enneagram, and I want to caution you as we begin to talk about this structure, is that I'm going to be using some words, and those words have certain meanings in common language. I want you to kind of set that aside, because those words, some of these words, such as aggressive, don't necessarily carry the same meaning within the Enneagram world as they do in our normal language. These are just, for this purpose, they're labels, and it helps us be able to talk about things. My lineage of the Enneagram teaches that we are born predisposed to our Enneagram type. That predisposition determines how we begin to habitually use our personal gifts and capabilities to gain the things that we need, to help get people to meet our needs when we can't meet them ourselves. Now, what happens in that, and it happens to all of us as young people, and you can probably think about some things like this, as you begin to try to interact with people and live in the world, you'll find that you'll try something and it's rejected, or you're criticized for it. And in our language, we would call that being wounded. And what that wounding does is it causes one of our centers of intelligence to kind of be pulled back. That's not one that works the best for us. And we can end up calling that being our repressed center. So within that thinking, modern psychology's assertion of the three centers of intelligence, my terminology, other Enneagram lineages and teachers would use singular, but not necessarily the same language. The three I would call are the feeling, or the heart center, the thinking, or the head center, and the doing, or the gut center. Now, to determine your personality type, it's really an intersection of which one of those centers is dominant for you, intersecting with which one is repressed. And I'm going to share a little 9-box thing here to help us see this. So if you look at that, across the top there, the three different, what are called triads, are identified. And that is your dominant center. So in me, I am an Enneagram 2. So if you look across the top there, I'm in the heart triad, and I'm in the dependent stance. That's so that's the middle one there. And you come across and you see the intersection there of the heart and the dependence triad and the heart dependent stance that gives you a 2. That is, I'm not going to go a whole lot more into that, but that's just to give you an idea about how my lineage and how we go about helping someone identify their numbers. Now I want to look at a little more complicated or a little busier diagram, and it's the diagram of the Enneagram with a lot of other stuff the diagram you're probably used to seeing. The yellow semicircles help identify the triads that we were just talking about. And then, for each personality type, there is a frequently used descriptor. Now, these descriptors, like for me, the 2 of giver, not all Enneagram teachers use that same descriptor, but it would be something similar. And you also see the traditional number. I try not to talk about numbers personally too much. I'd rather talk about Enneagram types. They're under each one of these numbers / descriptors you see in parentheses in red another descriptive word. And again, in my language, that would be called that personality type's passion. And the passion is the core motivator. And that's the key as to why self-identification is the most reliable means of determining your Enneagram type. Because your Enneagram type is really ultimately determined by your motivation, not by behaviors or actions. Then I want to move across the bottom of the diagram real quickly. There on the left, we identify the stances. And one of the things, if you went back and looked over on that previous 9 box, you would see that in each triad, there was a number that had each one of the stances. So in the heart triad, there's one number with a withdrawing stance, one with a dependent stance, and one with the aggressive stance. And that then, if you move to the center where it says the repressed center, moving straight across, that is what determines whether you're withdrawing, thinking, or whether you're withdrawing, dependent, or aggressive. Are you doing repressed? Are you thinking repressed? Or are you feeling repressed? And then finally, over here in the bottom right hand, one of the things that probably I hear talked about least, but I really think is important, is this orientation to time. And again, that is based upon your repressed center and your stance. So withdrawing people tend to focus more on the past. Dependent stance people tend to focus on the immediate present. And aggressive stance people tend to focus on the future. Like, I'm going to pick on Jay a little bit. I know Jay has told me he's a 3. And in working with Jay on the board of the Cobb Center, I can see his time orientation of the future coming out in the way he is guiding us and leading us. And specifically, one of the big things he's taken us through is a strategic planning process, looking to the future. How do we keep moving forward? So with all of that information, then the question I think we really get to is, what is the goal of using the Enneagram? And in short, I'm going to plagiarize from my mentor, Suzanne Stabile, and say the goal of the Enneagram is self-understanding and maturing beyond the limits of our personality. But one of the other things that the Enneagram really does, if we begin to go through the process, and in doing through the process to self-identify, we learn about all of the personality types. It increases our compassion and empathy because we understand that not everybody sees the world the way we do. And therefore, when we can identify that, and we've identified our repressed center, the real work then becomes of coming back into wholeness. And the way we teach it, the way I've been taught, is that you want to bring your 3 centers back into balance. And my friend and colleague and Hunter Mobley, an Enneagram teacher as well, I really like his definition of balance. Balance, as Hunter teaches it, and I have adopted, is not necessarily a third. Balance is the appropriate amount, the appropriate usage of each center given the specific situation. There are some times when thinking is really not appropriate. In an emergency situation, you got to react. You got to do. And you don't have time to think about it. And as far as that goes, and sometimes you don't have time to feel about it. You got to act. So if we are able to balance, and that becomes all the way across, because it includes balancing our orientation to time. When is it appropriate to look back and see what was good that we can bring forward from the past and apply to the future? And in doing so, figure out how we think we are moving forward in the best way. So this work, if you go through it and you continue to work through it, allows us to offer the world our best self and our unique set of gifts and characteristics that only we have. We know all the way down to our fingerprints that we are unique individuals. I want to close with this 3 final observations. And in some ways, they're kind of, I hope, a little bit provocative because we sure didn't have time to get into enough detail on these. But because we tend to work from our dominant center, the one that we had the best luck with, we can overuse it. And so therefore, it's a great tool. You know, for me as a tool to be feeling and to care about others is a great tool. But I can be so feeling about other people that I start trying to give to them before they really want me to give them anything. And I get involved way too quickly. So the best part of me, the best part of you, paradoxically, is also the worst part. One of the great questions that I learned, again, from Suzanne Stabile for all of life, I think, is the question of what is mine to do? And she says the way she determines that is basically 3 things. Does it have to be done? Do I have the skills and capabilities to do it? And then finally, if I do not do it, will it not get done? And you gotta have a positive answers to all of those. And I hope the third observation, I hope in what I've shared here real quickly, tells you that the Enneagram tells us that our life and we and it are inherently relational. And therefore, working with the Enneagram is what she describes as solitary work that cannot be done alone. It's spiritual growth work. Yes, we have to do it, but we need the accountability, we need the interaction, we need the help of other people as we walk that path. So, Jay, I'm going to stop there. I hope I've thrown out enough to give you something to talk about and react to and share with the rest of us.
Thank you so much, Ken. And I learned a little something about myself right in the middle of your talk. I'll speak for 10, 15 minutes, then we'll just open it up. I first discovered the Enneagram probably 15 years ago. And the way it was presented to me may not be the way that Ken understands it or others understand it, but I want to share it with you very quickly. The person who gave the talk was influenced by Richard Rohr, and this person said, what the Enneagram can do is give you it can help you think about your primary motivations. And she went over 9 of them. And she said, I'll run through the list and you just tell me if you hear yourself. The first is the need to be perfect, perfectly responsible, for example. The second is the need to be needed. The third is the need to receive approval. The fourth is the need to feel unique and special. The fifth is the need to observe, to understand, to assimilate information. The sixth is the need to belong, to feel part of a group. The sixth is the need to enjoy and feel like you're on an adventure. Then the eighth, if I skipped one, forgive me. The eighth is the need to be in control, to be kind of the boss. I'll fix it. I can take care of that. And the ninth is the need to be mellow, the need to be a peacemaker. And as this person presented this, the need to be perfect, the need to be needed, the need to receive approval, the need to feel unique and special, the need to observe, the need to belong, the need to enjoy, the need to be in control, the need to be mellow. She put numbers to those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And everybody in the workshop there said, I think I'm 3 or 4 of those. And we all got that. But she asked us to dig a little deeper and say, now just think about it. Does one of those happen to function consciously and unconsciously as a kind of central organizing principle of your life? All things considered, is the need to receive approval really important? Maybe even more important than the other things. Or the need to be perceived as unique and special. And I think by the end of the workshop, I myself said, well, I'm going to think about that. And I began to study the Enneagram thereafter, particularly with Richard Rohr. And I ended up being the type I least wanted to be, the type I least admired. I really wanted to be 2, the helper. That sounded so good. But I didn't want to be a 3, somebody that goes around needing and seeking approval all the time and puts the finger up to see which way the wind's blowing just so they can get a little applause. But I had to be honest that growing up, that was very prominent in me. And so I began to realize that this was helpful. The Enneagram was helpful in helping me at least understand some of my primary motivations. And just like Ken was saying, they can be gifts and they can be sins. Take that, the need to be needed. Take number 2, which is what I wanted to be. Oh, how loving they can be. Oh, how empathetic. Oh, how helpful. Surely Jesus was a 2. But actually, if you think about it, if that's the primary motivation, that can also have a pathology. You cannot live without being needed. And you will turn yourself, you will turn context so that you are needed. And the worst thing in the world that could happen to you is for some people to say, I really don't need you. That hurts. Or take number 4, the artist, so to speak, the need to feel unique and special. They're beautiful. They're rich imaginations, a sense of longing, consciousness of their wounds. But the downside of that is if you've got that mindset, you can think the worst thing in the world that could happen to you is that somebody might say, you're just like the rest of us. You're just ordinary. And that would hurt because I don't want to be ordinary. I want to be special. So I began to see value in the Enneagram as helping me understand my motivations. And also, this may also to be sensitive to the motivations of others. So do I know some people that need to be in control? Well, I sure do. And do I know some people that are almost hounded by the need to be perfect and responsible? I sure do. And I don't want to criticize them. I just want to say they may be coming from a different place than I am. And that can be a gift. And it can also be a sin because we're all in this together. Which takes me to process theology. Process theology invites us to recognize that the living spirit of God at work in the universe is in process. And that living spirit adjusts to who we are and where we are and what's possible for us. In the language of process thought, God is within me. God is more than me, to be sure, but God is also inside me as a beckoning call to become the best that I can be, given who I am and where I am. So the presence of God as a calling presence in process theology would be felt differently for, let's take category 9, the peacemaker. Every once in a while, God may call that person and say, get off your duff and react. Don't be so mellow. Come out of it. Life's more than that. Or to type 3, my type, hey, God may call you to be unpopular, unliked. Look at the prophets of the Hebrew Bible. They were all unpopular. They marched against the beat of social convention. So I appreciate to me, the Enneagram and the idea of a God who works with us where we are is very helpful. Also, there's a side of God in process thought that's not just a calling presence. There's a side of God that's a great companion that feels the feelings of all things empathically. I guess you might say this is God. This is the two side of God. But this side of God, the great companion, does actually share in our experiences and understands us. So Whitehead's phrase was a fellow sufferer who understands. And I like to think that there is something in the universe that encompasses and embraces in an understanding way all the idiosyncratic types that we are. Warts and all and gifts and all. The Jewish tradition teaches that we're all mixed bags. That sure makes a lot of sense to me. So I think the Enneagram has helped me at least appreciate differences. And so, yeah, Ken, I'm chair of the board of the Cobb Institute. Oh my gosh. If you look at our board, are we a bunch of different types? And we're motivated by different things. The core motivations are different. How do we work together for something good? So what are the ends that, if I were going to champion the Enneagram, and I do want to talk about its limitations in a moment, I clearly the Enneagram is a helpful tool for helping people come to understand themselves a little better and become their better selves as best they can. So personal wholeness. As a human being, I'm not interested in personal wholeness alone. I'm interested in social wholeness. I'm interested in just and sustainable communities. I'm interested in people gathering together and living in a caring way and sharing with one another in community. Can the Enneagram help with social community? Can it help be a tool for just and sustainable communities? I hope so. I hope so. And finally, as a process person, I'm interested in the planet. I care about the hills and the rivers and the trees and the stars and other animals, and I think they've got plenty of intelligence, and they probably got their own Enneagram types too. I've got a dog. I've got 2 dogs with me. I'm pretty sure one is a 9, a peacemaker. I've got another one that's I'm pretty sure is a 6, the need to belong. But how can the Enneagram be a tool to open us out to appreciate the rich diversity of life itself on this gorgeous planet? So I like to say the Cobb Institute talks about 3 hopes. Personal wholeness, yes, but social wholeness, yes, and planetary wholeness, yes. And can the Enneagram thus contribute? Are there weaknesses to the Enneagram? Of course there are. And one of the weaknesses is it's so powerful that people take it almost as a kind of sacred writ. And they look at the whole world in that lens. And so be it. I mean, a lot of us do that in some one way or the other, but it can function to pigeonhole things and to box people in. I'm a 3. You're a 2. There's your box. Here's my box. There's something not right about that. So how to use the Enneagram, but not let it function in a box-like way. I think it can be thus used in combination with a whole lot of other things. I think process theology can really help the Enneagram world. And I think the Enneagram world can really help process theology.